Hey, welcome to episode 6 of our summer series, Summer Road Trip.
Yep.
We are going through some divine detours today.
Yeah.
We, have been talking about road trips, and I know maybe when you think of those, you have some fun stuff that comes to mind. But Cole, what is your favorite road trip? Do you have one?
I have a couple. I took one road trip. I was living in DC, small flex, and took a road trip to Niagara Falls. That was cool.
So far.
Yeah, it was like a 7 or 8 hour drive. Super cool. It doesn't beat though taking 70 teenagers to the beach in a bus that has no AC.
It doesn't?
It doesn't get better than that.
It doesn't?
So that's
No?
that's my favorite road trip, I think.
What I'll glean from that is that we all have different experiences that we hold dear with these road trips that we take.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we do have, these detours, like things that we weren't expecting,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask the 15 kids who got stuck on the no AC bus,
Yeah, they probably
coming back
love
from
that one.
Daytona, they probably would tell you that they had a different experience than the kids who were on the AC
Yep.
bus, with all their buddies. It's just how these detours can work for
Yep.
better or for worse.
Yeah.
So what scripture are we coming out of today?
Coming out of John chapter 4, verses 3 through 7. And this is the story of the woman at the well. You want to give us kind of a recap of what the story is?
The best that I can. But, we have Jesus, he's in his years of ministry, and most people, the Jews don't like the Samaritans. They would rather cross the River Jordan than go through Samaria. But Jesus goes through Samaria, and he comes to the well of Jacob, I believe, and meets this woman, a Samaritan woman, and the way that he talks with her and interacts with her is a life-changing experience for her right then and there, something that she totally wasn't expected, a complete detour for her.
Yeah, it's a really unexpected moment, and I love some of the things that Jesus does in this story because he just kind of he makes it seem like he's talking about one thing, and so she's very kind of naive to his parable and the stuff that he's going with the living water. But every time he says something, he's actually talking about this whole other thing, and she doesn't even know really until the end of the story. And it kind of shows Jesus just kind of, I don't know, I feel like he's always one step ahead of us, and I feel like that's a really good sign to trust in him because we don't have the full picture. That's one of the things that I think through this story. What do you think?
Yeah. So, and then I think you kind of get to reiterate that with some of the points that we have for that message, right? Jesus is able to tell her things that only she really knows. And I think that when we approach Jesus, there's certain places, if we're going to use that kind of, conversation, certain places that we're willing to go with Jesus, right? But maybe there's certain places that we're not willing to let Jesus go in our lives. And again, that's just the idea of a detour, right? But God knows, Jesus knows those things, and yet we hold back. And so here we see him talk about the things that only she really knows, and he calls her out, but so gracefully, right? He calls her out to say, even as you are who you are, I have this living water for you. So that kind of talks about, our point one is just the acceptance that Jesus has for us. But then moving into number 2, then what do we do when Jesus does meet us in those places? When Jesus meets us in those places, then what do we do? And so we get to develop that. We see the story develop here in her life, but then the story is also challenging us in the same way.
Oh, yeah. Well, you made me think back to the other point about Jesus. It kind of seems like he's calling her out, and depending on how you read it, it can seem kind of dang, Jesus, just gonna throw it out there. But it really, to me, reads as Jesus seeing her. Who was it? Hagar that called God El Roy, the God who sees.
Yeah.
And I kind of view this as this moment. I was actually watching Spider-Man the other day, and it's I think Spider-Man Far From Home, and he doesn't trust anybody. He has to look at somebody. He's like, tell me something about me that only I would know to prove that this person knows him and loves him and is going to take care of him and not hurt him. And so I kind of like to view this moment as Jesus just being I see you for everything. You're doing some crazy stuff, but what I'm actually doing, I'm just seeing you as a full person, and we're about to have a life-changing encounter.
Yeah, and he goes on to kind of talk about, there are things that we will put into our lives that really will only satisfy us for a moment, right? And Jesus is I have so much more for you. So I do need to show you that I am trustworthy, that I do know these things, and I'm willing to go there with you, but I also have so much more to offer you, right? So, that's like number 3, like Jesus satisfies my greatest thirst. There's things and places that maybe we're not willing to take, but once we do, God is able to do abundantly more,
Well, she doesn't even know what she doesn't
yeah.
know. Like, she has
Yeah.
no clue what's going on here. And I like that point that he satisfies our greatest thirst, because there's even times where we don't realize that we're thirsty. We don't even realize, like, even in kind of in the way that Jesus phrases this, he's using living water to talk about eternal life, and she thinks he's taking the literal. She's like, you don't even have a bucket or rope. Like, how are you going to
get that water, guy?
And he's like, baby girl, this is so much different than you're thinking. And I think it's just a cool, like, Jesus has our best intentions in mind, even when we don't even know that we need something different. Like,
but I think that we all do know deep down that there's something,
something
and like, I think that she was so receptive to the conversation because she knew that there was something that she was missing, and that here is a man who seems to know me. He knows my heart. He knows the way. And so I think that if anything, we talk about the Bible as like an ancient text, but there are such human things throughout the history of what's going on here and through the history of humanity that we can all really relate to. There is something that Jesus offers that I need, even if I'm not quite 100% sure what that thing may be.
Yeah. And I really love, as this story kind of concludes, point number 4, Jesus sends me to tell my world. And I want to read verse 28, because it says, the woman left her water jar beside the well, ran back to the village, telling everyone, come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could he possibly be the Messiah? So the people came streaming from the village to see him. And it's just kind of a beautiful moment where it seems like a small thing Jesus does. He doesn't do this big grand miracle where he turns water into wine or walks on water or whatever. It's just this small conversation that he has that ends up saving this entire village. They all come to know Jesus and love him. And really, it's cool to know that Jesus is looking at the whole picture. He can look at and see me as an individual, but also see us as a community, and has the ability to save both of us at the same time. I think that's a really beautiful thing he does.
Yeah, and I think it just goes to show, like, Jesus's intentions all on the way. Again, these are people that Jews don't really associate with, but he came for the one, but it impacted the whole, and just how powerful that message really was for an entire people. So so Jesus sends me to tell the world. I don't think it wasn't hard for her.
Right.
It wasn't like okay, so now that I've told you this, in order for this to take effect, I need you to go and tell 10 friends, and that kind of thing. It was that the impact was so great that she could not help. Her joy was too overwhelming that she had to go and tell. Yeah. And I love that, because Jesus will find us in all of these places, and will meet us in the middle of whatever it is that we might be struggling with, and offers this same thing for us. And how can you not?
Yeah.
How could you not?
Yeah. And I think the last thing that I just want to kind of look at is contrasting this to, or comparing rather, this to last week's message about Jonah, and how in both stories God kind of advocates for the non-Jewish people.
Yeah, the Gentiles, for sure.
Right, the Gentiles, and kind of just, excuse me, it's this, again, trying to looking at the people who are difficult for us to love. And in both stories, whether they're the Assyrians, the Ninevites, and then here the Samaritans, like, God, it's not a problem for him to love them. He's gonna do what he can to try to restore these people, regardless if they're the Jews, if they're the chosen one. And I think that is a really beautiful aspect of God. And then go and tell my world. We have that same responsibility to love those that we consider the others. I think that's a good reminder.
Yeah, and it's definitely harder. It's easier said than done, but we see Jesus do hard things, right?
Yep.
He doesn't go around Samaria. He goes. It is not always easy to tell people the truth about them, even the truths that they know about themselves, right? But that creates a deeper relationship, a deeper trust, like just being willing to go in those places. So I love it.
Yeah, I think this is a great message, and
yeah. Well, so that's what we've got for you guys for today. And we are thankful that you guys joined us. And we hope that you guys really glean a lot of really awesome wisdom and knowledge from what Jesus has to offer us in this text.